Welcome to another Fireside Chat on ABC News and News Radio. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Chaz Ajadello.
This week, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris hit the campaign trail ahead of next week's Democratic convention, while President Trump claims a diplomatic breakthrough.
While everyone's been focused on the election, the economy and the pandemic, we've learned a lot more about the 2016 election and the Steele dossier. I'll be talking to journalist Aaron Marte.
And we'll have a chat with the first black woman elected US Senator and the second to run for president, Carol Moseley Braun, about Joe Biden and the black vote in 2020.
Plus also the latest on mail-in voting, the mask mandate, so much more, John.
So much more, Chaz. But first, the big political news of the week, of course, the announcement that California Senator Kamala Harris would be Joe Biden's vice presidential running mate.
Hi, sorry to keep you.
That's all right. You ready to go to work?
Oh my God, I'm so ready to go to work.
And yesterday, they did get straight to work. The first of a new kind of COVID-era campaign event, a rally at a school gymnasium in Delaware near Biden's house with a few reporters, lots of flags and absolutely no regular people. But the size of the venue probably helped to recreate a bit of a rally feel and try and show the two have overcome any lingering hard feelings from last year's primary. They certainly bonded over Joe Biden's late son, Beau.
Kamala, you've been an honorary Biden for quite some time. You know, I came first to know who Kamala was through our son, Beau Biden. They were friends.
And Kamala Harris also acknowledged that connection.
Beau was the kind of guy who inspired people to be a better version of themselves. He really was the best of us. And when I would ask him, where'd you get that? Where did this come from? He'd always talk about his dad. And I will tell you, the love that they shared was incredible to watch. It was the most beautiful display.
Kamala Harris also acknowledged some of the past tensions and the criticisms that she faced from some Biden confidants that she was, quote, too ambitious, and she made it very clear she would be loyal.
After the most competitive primary in history, the country received a resounding message that Joe was the person to lead us forward. And Joe, I'm so proud to stand with you. And I do so mindful of all the heroic and ambitious women before me, whose sacrifice, determination, and resilience makes my presence here today even possible.
And then she showed why she's on the ticket in the first place, as the former prosecutor took square aim at the current administration's handling of the coronavirus pandemic.
When other countries are following the science, Trump pushed miracle cures he saw on Fox News. While other countries were flattening the curve, he said the virus would just, poof, go away. Quote, like a miracle. So when other countries opened back up for business, what did we do? We had to shut down again.
So, Chaz, for anyone that's been to these kind of campaign launches in the past, this was a very different affair and something of a preview of next week's Democratic convention as well. But it seemed to serve its purpose, no major fumbles.
Yeah, no, they rolled out fine. It's just these early days, you never know what's going to be happening in the weeks ahead. We're just going through the motions at the moment, just ticking off what she brings to the table and what the knocks on her are. And in a month's time, we'll probably, if we're still talking about her, there'll be a new controversy. That will be the reason why. So let's do our job. Let's go through what she brings to the table. You brought up the personal connection already with Beau and through Joe. That's important, the personal connection, if they're working close together.
And it creates a narrative around why did Biden pick Kamala Harris that overcomes these accusations of, well, he picked her because it shores up the black vote and the female vote. So this is a non-pragmatic reason for making this choice, as well as the fact that she's clearly very competent and qualified.
Well, that's the next one. Ready to be president. YouGov had the poll out, a Snap poll, 53% of people said that she was ready to be president. And that's important because, get this one, according to Rasmussen, 59% of likely voters believe that Joe Biden will not finish his first term. Wow.
Given that he is going to be 8 years older when he takes office in January next year, if elected, than the oldest ever first-term president was, happens to be Donald Trump. That is clearly a huge issue, and it was a huge issue as well back in 2008 when John McCain, who was at that point the oldest ever first-term candidate, he lost obviously, but that's why Sarah Palin's apparent lack of competence for the job was such a huge knock on her. Now, Kamala Harris didn't have a great presidential campaign last year. She had her moments. She got to second to Joe Biden at one point in August, September after those first couple of debates. But there was never a question as to whether she was qualified to be president, just whether she was running a particularly good campaign.
Well, and the proof of that is right now. Right now, Conservatives are throwing everything at the wall. I'm going to go through this in a second. All kinds of contradictory criticisms. No one's saying she's not qualified.
No.
So that says something in itself, I think. The next thing, you've already played the grab of her prosecuting the case. The Vice President's meant to be a bulldog. And not necessarily fight fair either. The Vice President, like Joe Biden, he's supposed to be avuncular and friendly and Uncle Joe, and she's supposed to be mean and she's supposed to go hard. And she, during that same speech, she went real hard at times about COVID.
And tragically, more than 165,000 lives that have been cut short. Many with loved ones who never got the chance to say goodbye. It didn't have to be this way. 6 years ago, in fact, we had a different health crisis. It was called Ebola. And we all remember that pandemic. But you know what happened then? Barack Obama and Joe Biden did their job. Only 2 people in the United States died. 2. That is what's called leadership.
Okay, now that there was completely unfair. Ebola is nothing like COVID. Ebola is not nearly as contagious. It doesn't spread through the air. It was not a mystery disease. But that's kind of your job when you're the Vice President, to fight dirty.
Yep.
And she does it well.
And it's a kind of a courtroom tactic as well. And this is where, her other, you're right, her jobs are to be the attack dog, to attack Donald Trump and to a lesser extent Mike Pence in their one-off vice presidential debate in October. Also to talk up Joe Biden. She showed that as well, because Joe Biden can't say too many great things about Joe Biden. He can talk about his experience, but he can't say, I'm a profoundly decent human being with a deep wellspring of empathy based on a lifetime of tragedy and so on. Kamala Harris can do that and can do it well. So she's hit the ground running, and she's certainly showing us the reasons this week why she was the pick.
I'll tell you what else she can do. She can raise money. She's got lots of Wall Street friends, and she's got lots of Silicon Valley friends. She even raised money from the Trumps, $8,000 from Donald Trump and Ivanka Trump back in 2011 to 2014. Don't think they'll be giving her money this time.
No.
Also, there's this socialist anarchist thing going around, and according to the New York Times at least, she's a pragmatic moderate. Now, I wouldn't say she's a pragmatic moderate. You look at her voting record, the DW nominate is what they usually use. She's second most Liberal in the Senate, behind Elizabeth Warren. She's more Liberal than Bernie Sanders, according to that measure. I think he's 4th. There's a progressive measure called Progressive Punch, which has her as, I think it's 4th, I think she is. Yeah, she's 4th, and Elizabeth Warren's 5th, and Bernie Sanders is 10th. So anyway, she's Liberal, but having said that, she doesn't wear it on her sleeve in the way that Bernie Sanders does or Elizabeth Warren.
And a voting record based on what makes it to the floor in the Senate for a vote is very different to what is your worldview and what are your policy prescriptions. And you can certainly say, even though Harris had difficulty in finding where she belonged in that Democratic field, and she was kind of closer to Biden than she was to Warren and Sanders, but she was trying to be the kind of, everything to everybody, and in the end it didn't work out, which is why Trump has, with his usual skill at highlighting in a nickname what somebody's Achilles heel is, talking about Kamala Harris being a, quote, phony is potentially reasonably effective, because that was the kind of narrative that emerged organically through last year's primary. Was she's trying to be all things to all people and we really don't know who she is.
Well, on that note, let's go through the knocks. That's one of them. Also, her record as an Attorney General in California, there's a definite knock there. On one hand, she did establish a nation's first state-led database tracking police killings and racial bias, but she also threatened the parents of truant kids with jail time. She fought to uphold wrongful prosecutions even after it was proven that it obtained through police misconduct, such as evidence tampering and false testimony. She was still backing them even then. And they're the things that Gabbard schooled her in debates, of course. She also opposed marijuana legislation all the way up to 2014, even though now she's pretending she was always a great fan of marijuana legalisation. We'll leave that aside. Her ideology is the other thing, which people are knocking on. The right seem a bit confused. Is she a corporatist sellout or is she a socialist anarchist? These two tweets were doing the rounds at the same time from Trump supporters. Wall Street is delighted with Biden-Harris and will aid and abet the radical socialists and anarchists at every turn. But the Sanders left have made up their mind. Ex-Sanders spokesperson Breonna Joy Gray tweeted, "We are in the midst of the largest protest movement in American history, the subject of which is excessive policing, and the Democratic Party chose a top cop and the author of the Joe Biden crime bill to save us from Trump. The contempt for the base is wow." All right, so she's not a fan, but what's the truth? I personally think she's a bit like Biden, actually. I think she's a bit of a weather vane who will generally gravitate to wherever she thinks she needs to be to win. Probably a good thing to be in an election. That was certainly the view of the Justice Democrats communications guy, Walid Shahid. He tweeted, "Both Biden and Kamala Harris have somewhat floating ideologies, like a balloon tied to a rock. Harris being to Biden's left as senator and 2020 candidate means that progressives and social movements have moved that rock substantially and will continue to do so." I think that pretty much sums it up. What do you think?
Well, in other words, she is a pragmatist, as is Joe Biden, a pragmatist. In terms of their progressive credentials, I guess there's a fundamental problem whether you're judging Joe Biden on the votes he took against federally mandated busing to desegregate schools in the 1970s, or Kamala Harris as Attorney General of California and decisions that she took in 2010, 2011, or indeed prosecutions that she made in the 1990s and so on. Always judging things by contemporary standards is problematic, because if you're saying, well, this decision made 20 years ago or 10 years ago puts her out of step with, where the centre of gravity is now in the Democratic Party, that's always difficult. So the fact that she is getting criticism from both sides, but there are inconsistencies in their criticisms, just as there's inconsistencies in a record, means that she's a little bit reminiscent of somebody like Barack Obama, who was hard to pin down. And becomes a little bit of a cipher of whatever they need to be to get into a position of power to then make the decisions that are essentially not guided by ideology, but by a broad world view and a sense of social justice. So I don't think this is going to be a particular problem for Kamala Harris. And the idea that she is the socialist foot soldier inside the Trojan horse that is demented Joe Biden being dragged through the gates into the presidency, it's just not going to wash.
No, I don't think so either. I know we've got to move on, but I just want to mention one thing which I think is a bogus criticism, which is people are saying that she basically accused Joe Biden of sexual assault. That's what Tucker Carlson said. She accused him of sexual assault. What they're referring to is, remember last year in April, there were some women came forward who said that Joe Biden was basically creepily invading their space.
Lucy Flores sniffing her hair.
Exactly, yes. And they asked Kamala Harris about that, and this is what she said: "I believe them and I respect them being able to tell their story and having the courage to do it." And when she was asked whether Joe Biden should run for president, because he wasn't running at that point in time, she said, "He's going to have to make that decision for himself. I wouldn't tell him what to do." Now, to me, that's a non-answer. And it's not about sexual assault. It's about creepiness, absolutely, possibly sexual harassment if you're being harsh. It's not sexual assault. It's not the Tara Reid thing. People are trying to conflate them.
Right.
And that's not fair.
And at the time, Tara Reid, when she did speak out early on, more than a year ago, it was about sort of handsiness or just sort of, suggesting that she was good looking. It was a year after that she actually made the allegations that have since, well, they're still out there, but seem to be impossible to verify. Yeah. So, I feel as though that's probably, given as well President Trump's record in that area, that is a non-issue as well. Meanwhile, though, there are growing concerns about how this election is going to be conducted. The US Postal Service is being reorganised and cut back at a time when more and more Americans are depending on it during the COVID crisis. They're buying a lot of stuff online as well, and it is potentially, depending on what happens with the pandemic in the next 3 months, but based on some of the primaries, we could be seeing 50% of votes being mail-in absentee ballots, and not just in the states that encourage it, but in all states as well. And there's real concerns as to whether the mail is going to get through. Yeah, it could be even more than 50%, actually. It could even be up to 60%. But it's related to this fight about the COVID stimulus that we talked about on Wednesday. You might recall Nancy Pelosi